Our guest for the next hour is Matt Hackenberg, Libertarian candidate for governor. Matt, thank you for joining us. Why are you running for governor?
Well, I'm running for governor because I saw a system that was falling apart with corruption from both parties and feel like we need a new choice or another option.
Well, welcome to the PCN Call-In Program. I'm Phil Beckman. For the next hour, our guest will answer your questions about his candidacy for governor. Our toll-free number is 1-877-PA6-5001. Well, let's just kind of go back a little bit here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up?
So I'm originally from New Jersey, northwestern New Jersey, a suburb of New York City. We grew up there. I met my wife there. Then about 10 years ago, we decided to move to greener pastures. We moved over the river into Pennsylvania, seeking out fewer regulations, fewer laws, lower taxes, and just a better way of life. And we've been very thrilled with our new home. It's been a great place, and we've enjoyed it greatly. I've went to school for computer engineering. That's what I do as a trade, as my profession. I spent a time in the Army National Guard as a field artillery officer, and all these experiences led up to what I now believe and hold in these ideas of these virtues of liberty, and which is what I'm here to promote and push and forward.
Well, let's talk a little bit about each of those. Talk about college. Where did you go to school, and why did you select your major?
So I went to Rochester Institute of Technology. It's upstate New York. Originally I wanted to go there for computer engineering, and I've always wanted to go computer engineering as long as I can remember. I was one of the few people in my graduating high school class who had a purpose or knew what they wanted to go to school for, not just a generic major, but I actually had a dream of what I wanted to do, computers and technology, specifically like lower level things, hardware design, and the more nuts and bolts and nitty gritties of what makes electronics work.
Explain why that fascinates you. If you could explain to somebody who's not a computer engineer why it's interesting. Why is it interesting?
Well, it's our lives are largely run by technology these days, and even when I grew up in the times of the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, when these were just coming into the age, I was exposed to this growing up from my parents, growing up from early computers, and it just always fascinated me. And what better way to get into it than through computer engineering? Computer engineering is specifically the design of like CPU architecture and what actually the ones and zeros of the deepest level. So if something that fascinates you and you want to get it down to like the bare metal, the hardest of it is the peak of knowledge in a field, that's basically what I went for. That's what computer engineering is.
Now, you also mentioned that you were in the National Guard. Was that in New Jersey or in Pennsylvania?
It was in New Jersey, yes.
And what was your career field?
So I was already an adult. Already had my college education. Was working in aviation on the civilian side as an engineer. And when I decided at 27 years old that I needed to do something more with my life, I've always had a desire to serve and provide to the community and do for the community. At that time, I had already become somewhat of a libertarian. I was against foreign intervention, but I was a firm believer in the National Guard and its mission to defend the community, protect the community, serve the community. So that's why I decided to join the Army National Guard, and that's why I went in initially as an officer candidate since I had a college education, and then I wound up branching into field artillery.
And what was that experience like? When you look back on it now, what do you think?
Oh, it was a fantastic experience. I appreciate every moment of it. It was especially going as an adult. That's at 27 years old. It gives you a unique perspective that most people don't have when you go through it 18, 19, 20 years old. And that really kind of led me to where I am today as being staunchly anti-war. And we see how systematically the military-industrial complex, if you will, manipulates children into fighting wars and to giving themselves and giving their lives up to fight for causes which is led to believe are better for their communities, better for their nation or for their state. But in reality, it's often just for the betterment of some faceless corporation or some special interest. So seeing this firsthand as an adult was was shocking and eye-opening. and turned me to be devoutly anti-war and become a profound or devout libertarian, and sort of where I am today.
So talk about your current career. What are you doing, and how has your career evolved since you graduated from college?
So, I mean, it just progressed. I mean, I've worked a few jobs here and there, but I've worked largely with the same employer for the entire my career, working in aviation, just doing custom avionics design, basically making blinky lights and climate control and entertainment equipment for VIP aircraft. It's been an enjoyment. It's been a passion, and I truly love it.
How would your professional experience inform your role as governor?
Well, let's see. I've got to see a lot of how the connected live. I got to see a lot of how the people who are in power, the corporate elite or the extremely wealthy, I got to see how they live and the extravagance they get to imbibe in versus what everyone else is. It's been a job where I don't just sit in an office. I actually go out onto the tarmac and I turn wrenches with everyone else. So it's one being one of being a white collar, being an engineer, but also being blue collar, getting dirty and getting greasy and interacting with people and understanding this wide range of cultures and personalities that you get to interact with this in this field.
Have you always been interested in politics?
In a sense, I've always been interested in the political game in terms of how our lives are being dictated from afar. I never really considered running for office until more recently, within the past year. And before then, it's basically just a passion project of just curiosity.
Were there any key moments in your kind of political awareness that maybe kind of propelled you on the path you're on now?
Well, early on when I was still in high school, I was a big supporter of George Bush and the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And then come in 2008 with the campaign of Ron Paul for the Republican presidential primary, really opened my eyes to realizing that how wrong I was and how wrong I have been, and the mistakes I've made. And since then, I've grown off of that. His specific philosophy of libertarianism, his Austrian School of Economics, and the Mises Institute has led me to a greater level of understanding of how the government works, how the state works, and how human interaction as a whole works.
When you look at this political philosophy, how do you apply it in a practical manner?
Well, it's simple, really. It's you don't hurt people and you don't take their stuff. So that extends to the state, the government. So if you or I wouldn't be acceptable for me to take your things or to harm you if you didn't cooperate with me, that really should extend to the state, the government. We shouldn't be allowed to vote in to be able to rob other people or harm other people. And I think it's just pretty simple principles. Now, enacting it and getting it past what has become the norm, what is a result of full government education, indoctrination, it is a whole other challenge.
How important, as a member of a third party, how important is cooperation with other parties?
Really, I don't care too much about parties. I care about people and principles. The party affiliation is irrelevant in my mind. If there are many good people who have an R next to their name or a D next to their name, who I'd be more than glad to work with and more than glad to work towards greater liberty, greater helping the people and working for the people in the population. It's the people who work for special interests that I have no interest in interacting with or working with.
Now, are there areas of common ground that you can find with Democrats and Republicans?
Absolutely. With Democrats, I'm a very big proponent on decriminalization of drugs, all drugs, not just the obvious ones, but especially For the right, for conservatives, I'm big on deregulation. I think the state should have little involvement in our lives, whether it be personal, professional, business. I think we should be able to own our homes outright. I believe in the elimination of taxes or great reduction of taxes. So I'm willing to work with anyone on both left or right.
You mentioned the elimination of taxes. Property taxes are used to fund education. If you eliminated those taxes, how would you fund education?
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's obviously an inevitable goal. I believe that the state involvement in education has been a disaster. It's cost us ever more. It's been this white elephant which produces children with little discernible work skills that we give them K through 12 education, costing us ever more money, and they can barely operate a grill at McDonald's afterwards. So we have to send them off to university to learn to do more and rack up debt. So I think the big issue there is the state taking money from people, taxing people's homes, and then pouring more and more into education hasn't resulted in any beneficial outcomes over time.
Let's talk about your campaign. What's it like on the campaign trail?
Yeah, so far it's enjoyable. I get to talk to and interact with a lot of people. There's people who are devout libertarians, and they're great to talk to as always. But it's also enjoyable to talk to people who are R's and D's and largely disenfranchised, and they're on both sides. People see that the two major parties are not working for them. They have no concern in what their issues are, and to be able to talk to them as another person is very rewarding.
How do you, given that the Libertarian Party is the third party, how do you persuade people to vote for you when they may expect Democrats or Republicans to be in more positions of power?
Well, I mean that's always the great question. How do we persuade anyone to do anything? A lot of people have their mind made up whether they're going to be R or D or not vote at all. And my only hope is that we can help convey these ideas and convey these messages to make people think twice and really think like, hey, I do want to go out and vote for these guys. I give them a chance, or I don't want to vote for the R or the D unless they change their views on these stances and these ideas. Really, at the end of the day, my main goal here is to convey these messages and communicate these messages to hopefully move the window of allowable opinion, allowable thought, and help push the two parties in a direction of greater liberty.
How have you been campaigning? Are you traveling around the state, meeting with groups of people, or are you doing it mostly virtually?
A little bit of both. The significant increase in fuel costs has made traveling a little more difficult. My original plans were to do much more traveling, but unfortunately, at the price of gas, it's made it a little more difficult. But still, I travel when I can, and I do a lot of activity virtually, get on podcasts and whatnot, and try to communicate that way.
Have you received any endorsements?
Endorsements? Nothing like too major. I'd have to look back off the top of my head, but I'm not going to say one way or the other right now.
How would you distinguish yourself from the two major party candidates, the Democratic candidate Josh Shapiro and the Republican candidate Doug Mastriano?
Well, the biggest thing is that I'm actually promoting issues that matter to people. Where I'm talking about things like people are concerned about how they're going to afford to heat their homes this winter, right? People are concerned about are they going to have to send their sons and daughters away to another pointless war? These are issues that are much more pressing than what the two establishment parties are bickering about, whatever shows or charades that they're putting forth.
Now, one of the key responsibilities of the governor is to present a budget, and that's usually done in February. It'll be an election year with the new governor coming in, so it'll be in March. If you're elected as governor, what would be your budget priorities?
Well, my budget priorities would be to minimize the budget as much as possible. I said earlier, I support eliminating or minimizing taxes, and the first way to do that is to minimize and cut spending as much as possible. I think the state does a lot of things that shouldn't be doing, a lot of things that aren't efficient, done efficiently, and I believe that as much can be cut should be cut or curtailed as much as possible.
Can you give us some examples of some of the types of programs you would like to cut?
Well, I can't give you specific examples, but roll back across the board anything and everything that can be cut back or rolled back as much as possible. There's a lot of there's the state has endless programs of pork and just in reckless spending that just serves little benefit to the people and really without delving into it, and it's really hard to say which is going to be the best or most to go forward with.
Well, let's talk about infrastructure. Pennsylvania has many miles of roads and many bridges. Where do you see Pennsylvania's infrastructure needs?
Well, that's a tricky situation. Right now, my understanding is that there's a significant burden placed upon the highway infrastructure to pay to local counties in an annual sum, which increases them in debt and burden, whereas I believe the current debt of the highway system is now greater than the state. I don't know off the top of my head, but the infrastructure is an issue that, again, I think could be better managed or better restructured otherwise. In the involvement of the state and its micromanaging of it should be minimized.
How would many infrastructure programs are funded, some with the gas tax, some have other methods of funding. What would you prefer to use as a method of funding for infrastructure projects?
Yeah, I prefer usage fees. So a gas tax, I guess, is a method of usage fee. Other things would be like vehicle registration, licensing, tolls. I think this is much better than to put taxes and fees on other areas. So generally, the highways, the highway and road infrastructure pay for themselves. So ideally, that you would pay for your town roads through your town and county taxation. Then for the state infrastructure to be paid by usage fees.
And we're going to take our first telephone call of the evening. Steve, you're on the PCN Call-In Program. Go ahead.
Great, and I was on hold. Thank you for the opportunity to talk. And it's interesting with candidate Hackenberg's last answer because it leads to my question, which was about candidate Hackenberg. I think you dodged the question about how would you pay for public education of the children in the Commonwealth, and they don't come out any better than being able to turn on a grill at McDonald's. I think that's wrong. But that being said, again, I would push. My number one question is, how would you pay for taxes if you're going to eliminate the property tax? And in Jefferson County, it's a collaborative approach to roads and bridges and infrastructure. Are you suggesting something else? And that's probably way too much information. I'm going to stop and listen.
So just going to the county issues. In general, I think most these taxes issues and infrastructure investments should be handled at the county and town level. I think the state, by and large, the state should have as little involvement as possible. I believe moving everything as locally as possible. As for education, I'm a devout supporter of school choice. I think the parents should be able to take their money out of schools and to be able to do it as they see fit. How that would be funded, like I said, I'm not have any immediate push to end property taxes. Don't get me wrong, but I think if we created a system where we had school choice, where we'd allow there to be competition amongst the public school system, where right now we have a de facto monopoly, and as we expect with any monopoly, the cost goes up and the quality of service goes down. And if you create a system where you have competitors can compete and work and innovate to provide better education for lower cost, I think we have much higher quality education at a lower cost that gradually and eventually eliminate the need for government intervention and government involvement. And I think just by and large that this government subsidy in education has resulted in this great big school system, which is, like I said, you go through 12 years of education and kids know very little workable knowledge in science and math, engineering. It's very disappointing, and I think that could be something could be done a lot better if there was allowed to be competition and allowed to be innovation in the market.
Well, let's talk about the competition. Pennsylvania has 501 school districts. Doesn't that offer an opportunity for parents to move their children from one district to another? They have different tax rates, different types of schools in those districts.
Well, I mean, that's basically just saying, like, well, yeah, just move to a different school district. You're telling parents that up and move. That's a major undertaking. Having them locked into one school district based on their zip code is is a travesty. We can see that this mostly impacts in poor areas where parents who can't afford to live in a nicer area, they're stuck with their kids going to a school where there's so many issues of violence and very poor outcomes, and telling that let's just move somewhere else. That's not very helpful, and they should be allowed to take their money out of the schools, which many times is significant sums out of that school, and be able to take it elsewhere to a competing school, whether it be private or a charter school or otherwise.
So I want to switch topics to voting rights. How important is voting rights to your campaign?
Voting rights. I mean, I support every individual who's legal citizen of the state to be able to vote.
Now, one of the responsibilities of the governor is to appoint a Secretary of State, and Secretaries of State oversee election management. How would you? What kind of characteristics would you look for in a Secretary of State?
Honestly, I haven't given it that much thought, but in Secretary of State would be someone who's bold and steadfast to their principles, someone who's not easily swayed by pressure, someone who has a devout set of beliefs or a strong set of beliefs, and be there for the getting the message across, or be there for the purpose of the mission, and not just there for their political advancement.
Now, on the Libertarian Party website, there's a list of some platforms, and one of them is reverse the militarization of law enforcement agencies. What are the concerns there?
So, one thing we saw following 9/11 was this increase of reused military weapons being sent into the local and state police. Things like MRAPs, up armored vehicles, or just funding toward that end. And we've seen the situation now where police are more militarized. They're wearing body armor. They're wearing often equipped with M4 rifles, and much of this military equipment. But at the same time, they're not given the same level of training as the military. You see very poor muzzle discipline, very poor rules of engagement, and escalation of force, resulting in a disproportionate amount of police involvement shootings. And what this has also done is resulted in a distancing between the community and law enforcement. Whereas law enforcement used to be part of the community, used to be part of one of the community, working with the community to help the community, and now it's become it's almost against the community. It's now opponents of the community. And this adversarial nature that we've resulted from this is very harmful. It's very toxic, and we see a lot of the issues with a lot of the anti-police movement as a result of this. And this has started not just with the war on terror, but the war on drugs before that. And I think we need to go back to a place where the police are there to protect and serve the people, and not just to enforce arbitrary laws set forth by the state. And then also to equip them more appropriately and train them appropriately, so they're not going into as if they're going into a war zone when they're going into your local downtown neighborhood.
Now, this past summer, the U.S. Supreme Court issued its Dobbs ruling overturning Roe versus Wade. What did you think of that ruling?
I think it was a good ruling. I think the state should have, the federal government should have little control over what states do, whether you support abortion or not. I think it should be up to the states to decide, especially something so contentious and so strongly held beliefs on both sides. I think it should be allowed to the states to decide for themselves, and not for the federal government to dictate, especially not from the arbitrary legislation from a Supreme Court justice.
Now, you mentioned that you think it should be left to the states to decide. If you're elected as governor, you would be the chief executive of a state. What would your policies be?
Well, generally, I'm very much against abortion. I think abortion is wrong. It's immoral and unethical. But I can see no way that the state could ever reasonably enforce a ban on abortion that wouldn't be equally as terrible and unethical. So, as a governor, I would have little to say to do with it. I would more focus on what can we do to encourage women to seek, other recourses. What is it that we have in our society that women feel that they're better off getting an abortion than to get the support that they need to do otherwise. And why are we seeking so many abortions when we are? Not that I don't think the state should be involved in it. I don't think the state should ban it. And I think that we have better societal and cultural things that should be done.
Well, let's give our guests a break while we take a look at PCN's programming schedule. Coming up next on The Issues focuses on election 2022 with Libertarian for Lieutenant Governor Tim McMaster. That's tonight at 8 o'clock. Tomorrow night, we'll continue our discussions on election 2022 with Dan Wasmer, Keystone Party candidate for U.S. Senate. Call in with your questions Wednesday night live at 7. And if you want to stay up to date with all PCN's election 2022 coverage, you can watch debates, candidate interviews, and more on demand for free at pcntv.com/election. And please find a moment to thank your local cable company for PCN. They carry us on their channel lineup as a public service. We receive no state or federal tax dollars. Now, I want to talk a little bit about criminal justice. Are there key issues that you're interested in the criminal justice field?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I believe that the general principle of there's no victim, there's no crime. Any victimless crimes, I think, should not be enforced. I think people who are currently incarcerated for such should be immediately released. So these are things where the drug prohibition, prostitution, and other such crimes where all actors work there consensually and knowingly, that they should not be considered criminals and they should be let go.
Now, we're still in the COVID world, although we're not in the shutdown again. If you were governor, how would you address a pandemic like COVID?
Well, I absolutely would not do anything near what Wolf has done. I would not be arbitrarily shutting down the state and deciding who is essential or who is unessential. I would not be sending sick people into nursing homes to kill the elderly. I would be letting individuals decide for themselves what best to do. We'll let communities and towns decide for themselves. The state has no place to be in setting these dictates and these arbitrary guidelines, which have proven to be totally ineffective, and if anything, has been incredibly costly in both in terms of financial cost and in lives.
Now, the coronavirus pandemic has killed more than 1 million Americans. Do you see any role for public health measures to try to address that level of death by a result of the pandemic? Well, I mean,
I think provide guidance, provide input, sure. But I said providing dictates, I don't think is necessary. We've seen now that it's clear that the lockdowns did nothing. The lockdowns have created, massive, production interruptions, which we're now reaping the costs of. And that, the costs of these actions, or the actions of the state, of the government, may very well exceed the costs, the cost in lives of the corona pandemic itself. So it's hard to say for now what the state's actions, have they been beneficial or not. I think it's increasingly clear that they're not beneficial. I think it's going to be, at the end of the day, it's going to be that they wound up costing a lot more lives than they helped.
We're going to take another telephone call. Richard from Hazleton, you're on the PCN Call-In Program. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Hackenberg. You try to say the federal government shouldn't have anything to do with women's rights, but you say the state should? What gives you the right to tell a woman what to do with her body? You are out of your mind.
I'm not saying what anyone can do with their bodies. I'm saying an issue where there's a contingent of the population who believe that unborn child also has rights, and that rights of a living being, a living person, should also be recognized. I don't want to be involved in that weighing, that balancing act between whose rights are more and less important. And frankly, I don't think I think it should be best left to the states, not to the federal government.
Robert from Clearfield, you're on the PCN Call-In Program.
Hi, good evening, candidate Hackenberg. I got 2 questions for you. I'd like your thoughts on. The Democrats are accused, right or wrong, of being soft on crime. Republicans, it seems like they want to lock up everybody. But neither party is going after the real core issue, and that is the absolutely crushing cost of incarceration, especially at the county level. It's just killing them. And so I wanted to say your thoughts, he said, about how the county level criminal justice system is going to be able to survive in the days ahead. Secondly, when people think of libertarians, they often think of Ron Paul and others whose ideology is kind of out there on the very fringes. It seems to be the basis of it is just, hey, well, you're on your own, good luck. So how does a libertarian like yourself connect with people up here who are really hardcore Republicans, and they don't seem to want to entertain anybody who comes with a different approach. So those are my two questions. I'd love to hear your response. Thank you, sir.
Yes. So when it comes for the what we'll call is the prison industrial complex, the cost of this incarceration system is a racket, right? This is an industry. It's huge money, and it's to the point where now people are being incarcerated not for any real criminal justice needs, not for any betterment of our communities or our society, but just for the betterment of special interests. And that's a lot of this what this boils down to, and that's why these costs keep going up and up and up, because they know at the end of the day that you, the taxpayer, will pay for it, and you, the taxpayer, will be forced to pay for it. You don't have a choice. And as for we're libertarians saying that you're each on your own. That's not the case. That's not the case at all. What we're saying is we believe, and as far this is a message especially strong with Republicans and conservatives, that we believe it is for the communities and for the families to help each other. We think that putting all these services under the state and having the state handle all these things has broken down these things, instead of in the past where people would have to depend on their families and their communities, whether it be the church or local labor organizations. That now that everyone is just dependent on this faceless organization called the government to take care of them. And it has broken down where people are now lone individuals no longer working together. And it has been very destructive. So I firmly believe in helping each other, and I think that it is important that we as human beings should help each other and help the fellow man. But I don't think the state does that. I think the state does the opposite of that. I think the state dehumanizes us and makes us not people, not individuals as per se, but it makes us just numbers in a machine that are churned in and out as it see fits.
Now, Pennsylvania has become a natural gas producer through hydraulic fracturing has opened up new opportunities for natural gas. What types of policies would you implement in that industry?
Frankly, I think the state should have little involvement in regulating industries. I think that they're not the best suited for micromanaging these things. A lot of regulation really comes down to about permitting, which is really just about legalized bribes and control and protectionism. Really, I believe in property rights. So if you own property, you should be allowed to do with that property which you own. If you do something on your property which then pollutes or contaminates someone else's property, then you are liable to that person. And this is simply handled through basic common law. There's no need for any special legislation or regulations from the state.
Now, Governor Tom Wolf has entered the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative with some of the surrounding states. If you were governor, would you stay in that initiative?
Absolutely not. No, I don't. I don't buy into this whole narrative of controlling energy production, which it feels nice to the elites, to the wealthy who can afford it. But like I mentioned earlier, most people in Pennsylvania were worried about how we're going to afford to heat our homes, and adding these nice feel-good measures are just going to make these things more difficult and more challenging. It's going to put us further and further into poverty.
You mentioned the cost of heating homes. What policies would you implement that would make it easier for people?
Well, in policies per se, it's really got to look at what got us here and making these costs skyrocket and go up, and that's really what needs to be resolved. It's the state government involvement, whether federal government and to a lesser extent the state government. We need to explore our local production as much as possible, and try to get down costs as much as we can.
Where do you stand on minimum wage?
I don't support a minimum wage. I think the minimum wage is enacted or has been enacted as a means to price out the lowest members of the community, to price people out of that first rung, that starting rung. It is a long history and tradition in racism, and to keep both blacks and women out of the workplace. And I think that should be recognized. And it has the same effect today. It prices out young people. It prices out people who are disadvantaged. And raising the minimum wage just makes it worse. If an employer was going to pay a higher amount, they'd pay a higher amount. We see much of Europe, which are regularly held up as being, socialist utopias. They have no minimum wage because this is not an effective means of controlling or fixing what needs to be fixed.
Now, if you were elected governor, what types of firearms policies would you pursue?
I would ban the state police involvement or assistance to the ATF. I believe the right to self-defense is an inherent right. It's a one given by your creator or natural right. It is enshrined by the Second Amendment and in the PA Constitution. But as far as that goes, I think that there should be no regulations or restrictions on the ownership of firearms. And I think that the state should actively thwart the involvement of the federal government to try to interfere in the private ownership of firearms.
We're going to take another telephone call. George from Newcastle, you're on PCN.
Hello, Matt. Good luck. But anyhow, I called because of this property tax thing, SB 76. Nobody wants to touch this bill. I'm an 81-year-old man, and I'm still paying these taxes. And all the other seniors my age and older than me.
Yep.
Can you do anything about this? Tax. You know, it never ends. I'll hang up, Matt, and listen to you. Thank you.
Well, like I said, I think one of the biggest taxes I like to eliminate the quickest, or as soon as, is a property tax. Because, like you said, you never really own your home. You know, you may pay it off your own mortgage to the bank, but you're still in effect leasing it or renting it from the state or from your town government. And God forbid you miss a payment of your taxes, and they'll come and take it from you. And that house which you poured your entire life's effort and your entire life's savings into can be gone in a heartbeat, simply by not paying taxes. And from this party who has no involvement in your building that home and you're owning that home. And really, you should have the option, the ability to be able to get out of the system and actually own your home and own your property outright.
Now, you've talked about some of the different functions that state government is performing that you would like it not to perform. Are there any things that the state government does that you think are essential and should be maintained?
Yeah, probably not. No, I mean, to be honest, the biggest thing that I think that, if anything, the state should do is defend the people from the ever-encroaching federal government. Outside of that, I think that the state government should not be encroaching on people's lives and not encroaching on people's liberties. Outside of making sure the federal government minds its own business and leaves Pennsylvanians alone, I don't think that there's much that the state government should be doing.
Now, you had also mentioned that there are some issues that you felt should be dealt with at the local level, at the county level, township level. If those issues are pushed down to those levels, how will those local governments raise money to fund those measures?
Well, by and large, I think that all decisions of taxation and spending should be decided as close to each individual person as possible. So like I said, that's the county or the township level. How they raise taxes, that is for them to decide. That is for them to figure out what works best for them. And the challenge of that is that puts constraints on what they're going to spend, what they're willing to spend. If the person who you're taxing can go knock on your door in the middle of the night and tell you, hey, what's going on? Why are you charging me more and more money? Then you're going to be less likely to want to tax more and less likely to spend more. Right now, there's very little accountability. When taxation is done at the state level or even the federal level, even more so, there's very little accountability to this. And money is just taxed and spent in increasingly inefficient ways and wasteful ways, which goes more often to not to helping special interests and very rarely ever helping the individual taxpayer.
So you're saying that you do support taxation at the county government level, but just not at the state government level. Is that correct?
I mean, I never want to say I support taxation. I think taxation is theft. But if I were to choose, I'd rather at the local level, more local the better, by and large.
How would you assess the current state of Pennsylvania's economy?
Well, it's tough to say. I think we have a lot of good resources, both in terms of natural resources and also in terms of human resources. We have a lot of very capable people that are capable of doing a lot of valuable tasks and things that will be worthwhile, for many, many ages to come. And also we have all these minerals and oil and gas, and I think we have a great prosperous future ahead of us. It's just a matter of getting the state out of the way and letting people do what they can do best. I have a lot of faith in Pennsylvanians to excel and exceed those of the surrounding states. And like I said, it's just a matter of letting that individual ingenuity and that creativity and that need to thrive and survive to run its course and let them to operate without being hampered by an ever-encroaching state.
And we're going to take another telephone call. Gene from Oxford, go ahead.
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
The reason I'm calling, I was listening to some of the comments about the property taxes, but I'm a renter. I can't afford to own a home, but I still pay taxes, school taxes, through my landlord. Now, if you eliminate the real estate property tax, what are you doing to ensure, or what would you do to ensure that renters would see the refund, not just the landlord? Thanks. I'll listen to your answer. Thank you.
So that the solution to that is simple. Really, it's just the market prices, right? As prices, other landlords, other property owners will feel the need to lower their prices to outcompete others. So that'll just drag down prices, and that's how things normally work. It's the same way that price got passed on to you to begin with. Over time, the competition will push it back down. Now, it might require a little hiccup, it might take a little leadway, a little lag time, but inevitably that savings will get passed on to you.
Rick from Altoona, go ahead with your question.
Hello. I'm wondering about the property taxes also. I was thinking about where I live, we got 3 high schools within 7 miles of each other, and I want to know what you feel on consolidating the high schools to lower our property taxes. I don't think these schools should be kept open just for Friday night football games. And that's my question. Thank you.
I think these problems could all be resolved by school choice, right? You allow parents to take their money out of the school system and put them in the school system they want to go to. No longer will these schools get funded by de facto from property owners in the town. They'll have to actually compete on a market that's like any other service provider. If they can't provide anything more than a football game on the weekend, then they're not going to be able to stay in business, stay in operation, and they should be able to shut down, and that resources should be released. The teachers should be freed up to go work elsewhere, to go provide their services. They can be more productive, and the property should do the same.
So you mentioned that you would prefer a school choice model where parents can take money and spend it on their own. That money is collected by taxes. If you eliminate the taxes, where will that money that parents would have to make a school choice option come from?
Well, I said ideally, I would like there not to be taxes, but the priority here is the school choice, initially with the taxes. But my feeling is that given the chance to innovate and to compete, that will drive down the cost of schools and, in effect, then drive down the need for taxes. I firmly believe that the property taxes could be eliminated, and that parents could be able to easily afford their own child's education without the burden of property taxes. But it's a system that needs to be gotten there over time. It's a chicken or the egg problem. Because right now, we see education as being this big, expensive monstrosity. But in my mind, that expensive monstrosity is only an expensive monstrosity because of the corruption of the public education system. The fact that it's currently funded by mandatory taxes that are taken from you and fed into this system, which is more interested about lining the pockets of administrators and middle management types than actual educators, and not really interested at all about helping the children.
I wanted to ask you about civil asset forfeiture. Where do you stand on that?
I believe it's a travesty, and it should be stopped immediately across the state.
And one of the policy proposals that's on the Libertarian website is restoring Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable searches and seizures. What do you see as the issue there?
Well, a lot of this started with the war on drugs. When you made the mere possession of an item a crime, how else are you going to enforce it by giving the state, the police, the power to search you in ever intrusive ways? On top of that, the war on terror, it's been a disaster. By rolling back those policies, we can go back to a position or a society where there's no need for these intrusive searches. No more of these roadside inspections of your car looking for drugs hidden in there and whatnot. And overall, just a respect of your person and your property.
How would you develop policy for people who've been convicted of nonviolent drug offenses?
I believe people who have been convicted of nonviolent drug offenses are not criminals. I feel like they've been wronged by the state and that they should be cleared. And I might even go as far as say paid restitution too for the inconvenience of their lives that have been harmed. I think that the criminalization of drugs in general has been a disaster and is the main cause of the current opioid crisis. Which we can go into that in great detail.
Well, let's talk about that, the opioid crisis. Are there certain policies that you would implement to address those issues?
Yeah. One, end the war on drugs and the decriminalization of all drugs. The drug addiction is a medical problem. It's not one that can be resolved by throwing people in cages. Law enforcement should have nothing to do with this. I believe that the doctors in the state should be allowed to freely prescribe, alternate treatments like Suboxone or methadone, and not be restricted as they currently are. I think these programs should be made readily available to people, and we should stop treating people as being less than for being addicted to a drug. As we recognize that these people became addicted to this drug for a reason. We can't just keep blaming it on a pharmaceutical company or other doctors from getting them hooked. They're taking this drug because it provides them some benefit, and we need to figure out what can we do to get them to survive and realize that they don't need this benefit or work without it. And we can only do this through a holistic means, and by recognizing that people are individuals and people have struggles and they have hardships, and getting this threat of incarceration off over their heads is going to be step one to solving this problem.
Now, Pennsylvania raises money for infrastructure through a gas tax and fees, and that money goes into the motor license fund. For several budget cycles, there's been a lot of concern that a big chunk of that money is being used to pay for the state police, and they've had a hard time finding alternate funding methods for that. If you were governor, what type of alternate funding sources would you find for the state police?
Well, I think that a lot of the state police's operations can be, curtailed. If we're not forcing a war on drugs, that's going to reduce a lot of their needs and things that they do. I suspect a lot of their expenditures are extravagant and unnecessary. Not that I'm necessarily anti-police, but I think in general, I think it's better law enforcement be left to, again, the towns and the counties. I think that the state police involvement should be lessened, and it should be allowed to the towns to police themselves.
We have just a couple of minutes left. Use that time to explain to voters why they should vote for you. Yeah, so thank you. If you are tired of the same old, regardless of you vote for R, N, D, or D, regardless of who's in power, we get the same general trend that the special interests get wealthier and wealthier. Meanwhile, the rest of us get poorer and poorer. It's harder for us to survive, and these elite few get in better and better position. It should be clear to everyone by now that the R and the Ds, they are two wings of the same bird. This is a little more than choreographed, professional wrestling, if you will. They put on a good show for the TVs, and then afterwards they go and they play golf together, all at our expense. So if you actually want to stop this and you actually want to make change, then you should vote for Libertarian or vote for any of the third parties. My suggestion is Libertarian because we have a strong, principled philosophy behind us. And we have been the longest, one of the strongest third parties in the state and nationally. And we are poised to take over for the shortcomings of both the two establishment parties. Our guest tonight has been Matt Hackenberg, Libertarian candidate for governor. Matt, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
After tonight's call-in program, stay with PCN for On the Issues. We'll talk about election 2022 with Libertarian for Lieutenant Governor Tim McMaster. That's next at 8 p.m. And if you didn't get a chance to call in and comment during our show, you can post your question or comment to our Facebook page or on Twitter. I'm Phil Beckman. Thanks for watching.